Hello, Ms. Spencer. So welcome to officers from... There's a change of faces. We haven't got... Where's Professor Dr. Alec or wherever? Be the first time in 300... Oh, no, there he is at the back there. Sorry, he's there. Oh, hang on. No, there you go.
Ms Spence is the only...
So...
Where's that gender?
Ms Spence, welcome. Did you wish... Or are you brave enough to make a brief opening statement with the time that we've got left?
Oh, choose not to. Thanks, Senator.
Thank you very much. Question, Senator Smith.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for your time here this evening, Ms Spence and other officials. I just noticed it on your name tag, Chief Executive and the Director of Aviation Safety. Could you explain to me why it's necessary to have both roles?
Because it's the job actually is two titles. One is the person responsible for running the organisation, and there is also a role under the legislation as the Director of Aviation Safety.
And have the roles always been combined?
Yes, Senator.
Great. Can you tell me, across Northern Australia, the deployment of CASA officials at various aviation centres? Mr Walker was nodding his head.
Yeah, I mean, but first of all, I should probably just point out we do operate under a national operating model, and so while we do have staff located in Northern Australia from Cairns and Darwin, we are able to send resources from other areas in the organisation to support operations in Northern Australia. But I'll pass to Mr Walker to provide a bit more detail.
Thanks, Pip. Rob Walker, I'm the Executive Manager for Regulatory Oversight Division. And yes, we do have state offices right around Australia, particularly for Northern Australia, office in Darwin, office in Cairns, and the other most northern office would be Brisbane office. In terms of our Cairns office, we have roughly 23, 24 staff in the Cairns office. We have 11 staff in Darwin. Brisbane is one of our larger offices with about 219 staff.
So when we think of northern Western Australia, which is my home state, what is the most northern town that has a CASA presence?
Generally, northern Western Australia we manage out of our Darwin office, and that's also supplemented with staff out of the Perth office.
So the 11 staff that operate that are permanently based in Darwin are also responsible for northern WA?
Yes, but as Ms Spence said, we're supplemented with our staff nationally. The way we run our operations for the organisation, particularly in my area for regulatory services, rather than being location specific, we have staff available to service those needs out of any CASA office depending on where the surge in demand is. One thing we don't really have a control over is where the work comes from and when it comes. And so we deploy local staff generally as a preference, particularly for regulatory services where there's some local knowledge, and particularly also for our surveillance activities. Otherwise, we would defer that work to one of our other offices.
So, staying with northern Western Australia for a moment, how frequently would CASA officials or officers make themselves present at various aviation locations across the far north of Western Australia? So I'm thinking Kununurra, Fitzroy Crossing, Halls Creek and Broome, Derby.
Yeah, certainly. So that would very much depend on what work we have afoot, and particularly, as I say, for regulatory services, we would respond to service requests out of the local operators at those locations. In terms of surveillance, we have a national plan, an annual plan for surveillance, and we would look at specific operators or specific sectors on and generally taking a risk-based approach. So I couldn't say definitively they're there every second week or once a month. It is really very driven by what is the work demand in those locations from those operators.
So when you use the term regulatory services, what does that mean in detail in terms of the sorts of activities?
Yes, certainly, Senators. For any commercial operations in Australia, an operator requires an air operator certificate. So that doesn't matter whether you're a large operator like Qantas that would have multiple air operator certificates, right down to some of the smaller Part 135 or more commonly known as charter operators. As they conduct operations, they may have need to interact with us. Effectively, the way the regulations run is they require certain permissions from us to operate. And in the nature of their operations, that may change quite regularly or seldomly. It really depends on the nature of the operation. If they want to introduce new aircraft to their fleet, that would be a touch point for CASA. If they want to change their key personnel, so if there's a change of safety managers or even CEOs, that is something that they interact with us. So on any given year, we would have a large number of regulatory services activities, but it is very much driven by the permissions that industry would be seeking from CASA.
And because time is of the essence, surveillance activities, you use the word surveillance, because for the committee just provide us with an explanation about what you mean by that.
Yeah, so there's two parts to it. Industry obviously seek permission to do certain things, and we make sure that's done first and foremostly safely, and it's done in alignment with the regulation. And then we also have a surveillance component where we check and verify that industry is doing what they said they were going to do or they asked permission to do. So it's basically separating the service provision from a validation exercise to go and check that they are compliant with the regulation.
So I'm assuming that when CASA officials do make themselves available across far northern Western Australia, Halls Creek, Connemara, Broome, etc., you would keep a record of that?
Most definitely. Every regulatory service interaction is recorded, because obviously that we are obliged under our regulation to charge a fee for those services, and effectively they are predetermined and agreed. And equally for surveillance, which we don't charge for, we keep a record of that, so we have as full a picture as possible of the safety operations of an organisation.
So in terms of your record keeping, there are two sets. There's the regulatory service interaction and then there's the surveillance interaction, and you would keep and the sort of record that is kept?
Effectively, yes. It is one system in terms of our record management as an IT system.
Date, day, person, operator?
Correct. Right down to the storage of documents. In terms of some of the documents we would be required to assess an application could include their flight operations manual, it could their safety systems manuals, it could include areas such as fatigue, etc.
Great. On notice, for the period 2018, 2019, 2020, 21 and 22, can you provide me with information about the presence of CASA officials and as much detail, I'm someone who's very, very happy operating in the detail, detailed information about the regulation, service interaction and surveillance activities of those officials on those particular days?
Certainly, Senator. It might need to qualify it somewhat in that not all regulatory services require physical participation at location. Generally, though, we could provide you with information on the nature of the regulatory services and the locations where those occurred.
But it would identify whether it was done remotely or on premise, physically on premise.
Generally, yes.
Great, thank you very much.
Senator, the other thing that we can also provide advice on is we also have an executive role, so we do have other officers who engage with industry just to make sure that industry understands why the regulatory framework operates if there are particular issues they want to deal with. So we can also talk to you about what the aviation safety advisors do, who also aren't based necessarily in that region, but will go out and visit operators in those areas. So we'll include that.
We'll
include that in our
Great. I just want to turn specifically to Robinson R44 Raven helicopters. How many Robinson R44 helicopters are registered in Australia at the present time?
So I have to take that on notice.
You sure you don't have it there?
I'm positive I don't have that in my pack.
Would you like to take an estimate? 100? 200?
Senator, I'd rather give you an accurate answer, so we'll certainly take
No, well,
that
you're
on
welcome
notice.
to give me an answer and correct the record. You are the Director of Aviation Safety.
Yes, but I don't have the number of R44 helicopters operating in Australia, but I can certainly get that for you on notice.
Perhaps while we're having this discussion...
If any of my team behind me know what the answer is, I'll certainly jump in and let you know, Senator.
Right. And I'm also interested to know where they're located.
Yeah.
So if someone can give me a figure, are they located in Northern Australia? They're located in Perth, Melbourne, etc. I'd be very, very
Senator,
interested
we'll give
in
you
that.
as much information as we can. I just don't know if we'd have that breakdown for you, but whatever level of detail we can provide you with, we certainly will.
In the ATSB Transport Safety Report that was done into the incident that occurred in Broome on the 4th of July, where a young woman, young girl, lost her life, just for the record, it said there were 558 Robinson R44 helicopters in Western Australia. Before we turn specifically to the ATSB report, what is CASA's attitude in regards to the safety of Robinson R44 Raven helicopters?
Look, Senator, it is an issue that we have been looking closely at, probably towards the end of last year, just in response to a number of incidents involving both the R44 and the R22 helicopters. We did an analysis looking at over the last 10 years to see if we could identify any specific trends, whether it was location, type of operation, or any other sort of factors, causal factors that created any suggestion that there was a particular issue that we needed to look into. We couldn't find any particular trends, but we are monitoring it closely. We work very closely with the Australian Helicopters Industry Association. Obviously, we are concerned by the number of accidents and incidents that we're seeing, but as I said, we did do a review to determine if there was anything specific that we could see was linking the accidents and incidents.
So you found it necessary to do an analysis?
Yes, based on the number of accidents and incidents that have been happening.
The analysis found no consistent
That's correct, Senator.
determinants or issues. Did other aviation experts outside of CASA find that analysis surprising, reassuring?
Senator, we haven't discussed that with any other aviation experts.
Did Robinson R44 helicopter manufacturer participate in that
It was based,
analysis?
No, it was based on the data that's available, so based on ATSB accidents and incident reports, and then
In Australia?
In Australia, yeah.
And you didn't think it necessary to inquire about accidents that might have happened outside of Australia?
Senator, I'd have to look into I'd have to get back to you with the detail of what other factors they looked into as part of that analysis that we did do. I'm certainly not saying it's the end of the work that we're doing looking at it, but based on the work that we've done to date, we haven't seen any causal factors that we need to act on.
So the incident that happened in Broome on the 4th of July, was that one of the incidences that assisted CASA come to the view that it was necessary to do this analysis?
Yeah, it would have been one of the accidents because, as I said, it was in a 10-year time frame, so dated back from any accident and incident from, I think, the end of either start of 2022 back to 2012.
And the analysis found no consistent...
No causal links or anything that sort of gave rise to us to do further analysis. But as I said, we are continuing to work with the AHAA, the Australian Helicopters Industry Association, and we will continue to, monitor and undertake any work we need to.
Has that analysis been peer reviewed?
Senator, no, I don't think so.
Will it be?
No, Senator, not.
Why not?
We didn't have plans to do that, but I can certainly take on notice what.
But you obviously thought there were enough incidences to warrant CASA to do an independent analysis.
Yes.
The independent analysis found no consistent causal influences or issues.
Yeah.
I would have thought, from an aviation security perspective and abundant caution, that a peer review might have been a...
Well, I think, Senator, because of the nature of the analysis that was done, the data is the data, and so we were looking at is there any trend there. I'm not saying there isn't further work we can do, and I think it's a sensible suggestion you're making, and I'll look to see what else we can do in that space.
So is the analysis a public document?
No, it's not, Senator.
Will it be?
Can I take that on notice, please, Senator?
Is it your decision?
I would like to review the document to determine what the best course of action would be.
No, that's separate to my question. Is it your decision about whether or not the analysis becomes a public document?
I would want to consult with the board before I release the document.
Okay, thank you very much. So then turning specifically to the issue in regards to Broome on the 4th of July 2020, what is CASA's general attitude in regards to that?
Well, I mean, apart from the obvious statement that it was a tragedy and
of course,
terrible that it happened, I think one of the points that the ATSB made clear in the analysis or in their investigation is this was a private operation, and the way in which our regulatory framework is established, we do have a higher level of expectations around those operators who we authorise their operations. So as Mr Walker said, who've got an air operator certificate, who are essentially providing commercial transport services. And then there are still requirements, obviously, on expectations on private operations, but they do not meet the same safety standard as what you'd expect for a commercial operation.
In your statement of the 14th of April 2023, which I think might have been released in response to some media inquiry, you do make the point that the accident flight was not a commercial tourist operation but a private flight organised for family and friends.
Yes.
You then go on to say that private pilots conducting private operations for family or friends must still follow the aviation safety rules, including the requirement to hold a valid and current licence.
That's correct, Senator, and if the pilot hadn't been deceased, then we would have taken action because what the pilot did was illegal.
So what actions has CASA taken since the release of the ATSB report on the 12th of April this year?
I might get my colleague Mr Marcellia to come to the table, but essentially we've done extensive campaigns to educate pilots on what is appropriate and how to operate legally. We're working again with the Helicopter Industry Association to see if there's any other ways that we can influence behaviours of pilots. We're looking at how we best ensure that pilots are aware of when certain requirements, like when their medicals have expired. We already give them notice around that. Is there anything else that we can do to make sure that they take all their efforts to maintain currency? But I might turn to my colleague, Mr Marcellia.
Thanks, Senator. Andreas Marcellia, the Executive Manager for Stakeholder Engagement. So within my remit is safety education for pilots. As Ms Spence said, the approach we take for private operations is very much around raising awareness and educating. So we've got many different campaigns, including seminars to pilots, online training. We've been running a pilot safety campaign since about August last year. That's specifically targeting safety behaviours in pilots, and we're getting some really good uptake and participation in that. So it is very much an educative approach. We've got about 30,000 plus pilots in Australia. Helicopters make up maybe 10% of that or so.
No, but to be clear, we're talking about a particular type of helicopter and a particular type of activity in a remote part of Western Australia, or in a remote part of Northern Australia, to be fair. Mr Walker, you talked about risk management techniques. If you read the ATSB report, it does demonstrate that there were some recurring, or there were more than one incident in regards to the pilot. So I'm curious to know why the risk management technique that you talked about did not identify this. I understand the importance of education campaign, but to be fair, it sounds generic.
So, Senator, I think the point I'm making and that the Director was making was that our surveillance and our enforcement and our oversight activity is very much focused on commercial operations. So we focus very strongly on commercial operators, tourism operators.
The risk, and I'm not an aviation expert, but as a layman, reading the ATSB report makes it very, very clear to me that the emerging risk is actually amongst private pilots, private operators. So I'm keen to understand what are you doing to mitigate what I would characterise as an emerging
Well, Senator, one thing that I would like to clarify is we did obviously look back as one of the things that we do to see what visibility or awareness we had of the pilot and any incidents that he'd been involved in. And I think all we found was one incident that had been acquitted. So it's sort of like if you get a demerit point and then that demerit
What was that one incident?
I'll have to take it on notice. I'm sorry, Senator. I thought I had a piece of paper.
Helicopter crashing on a boat?
No, it wasn't.
Oh,
Senator.
so another incident, in addition to the...
Well, I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah, Senator, if I think I understand the incident you're talking about, it is the same incident that Ms Spence is referring to, and that was flying too low, and that was in the close proximity of a boat.
It hit the boat?
It hit the boat, correct.
It hit the boat?
And,
Yes.
and the incident was investigated, and there was a requirement that the pilot, I can't remember what he had to do, but there was actions taken, and so...
So again, I'm a layman.
Yeah.
But my reading of the report, I identified these issues. The issue around the pilot's licence,
Yeah.
issues around the maintenance release form,
Yes.
issues around the previous instances of poor pilot practice.
And I just point out that's one...
That's already three.
That's yeah.
already...
Can I just...
the existence of non-reported incidents. And then I've got here... no, so that's 4.
So just the maintenance release one is a very important one, and obviously...
It's serious.
It's very
serious.
serious. And so, again, that goes to the executive...
A young woman, young girl, and another passenger, to be in the interest of full transparency, lost their life. Now, I can... It appears to me, again as a layman, that here was a recurring set of circumstances in a remote part of Western Australia, which, to be fair, is well populated in terms of remoteness. To go back to where I started, I was interested in understanding CASA's presence. So this is an area that has pastoral populations, pastoral pilots, heavily dependent on the tourism industry. And here's a set of circumstances, and when we started, I was not convinced that CASA's physical presence in a place like Broome is sufficient in order to police and protect.
But, Senator, I mean, first of all, if reports are unreported, then we can't take action on them, and I'm not trying to be cute or smart on that one, but what we don't know, we don't know.
Ms Spence, YouTube videos.
We don't spend our time scanning YouTube videos.
So your surveillance activity does not involve monitoring or policing advertisements of tourist operators?
But Senator, can we please be very clear? This is not a tourism operation. This was a private pilot.
And by your own media statement, you have said private pilots conducting private operations for family or friends must still follow the aviation safety rules, and you are the aviation regulator.
But Senator, the pilot broke those rules. I totally agree with that, and if the pilot had survived, we would have taken enforcement action. But what I'm trying to say is it was a private pilot in a private operation who did the wrong thing.
It was not invisible. There was a recurring.
Well, Senator,
there was recurring behaviour on the part of the private pilot, I would contend.
And Senator, I would contend there was an incident that we were aware of, that there was actions taken, and he did what he was required to do. So I don't think you could point to a recurring trend of us not acting on something.
Sorry, Ms Spence. Yes. I'm loath to come in, but and I can't express my condolences deeply enough for the families of the 2 people who lost their lives, and I'm keen, if you want to keep going, although it has nothing to do with the budget. I know how flexible we have been in this committee. It is 10 o'clock. I will seek support from my colleagues if we're going to continue questioning for CASA, because I know Senator Roberts has. Are we still likely to get to Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility? We are, okay.
Chair,
So-
thank you for your indulgence.
so-
You did give me the call, so I'll just take 3 more minutes if
Yep,
that's okay.
fine, thank you.
Because we can pursue this in private briefing if the
very
Minister
happy
is so inclined. So, what has CASA done since? In the detail. Has CASA taken the initiative to speak to the family?
No, Senator, we haven't.
Has
That's a
the
very good
family
point.
requested an opportunity to speak to CASA?
Not that I'm aware of, Senator,
Mr
but
Walker?
Not that I'm aware of, Senator, no.
No?
but we would be very, I totally agree. It's a tragedy, and we'd like to make sure that they understood what had happened and why we're taking our responsibility seriously.
Agreed, Ms Spence, what happened, but future remedies.
Yes, yes,
And future
yes.
mitigation, absolutely. Minister, Assistant Minister, congratulations on your additional responsibilities. Will the Minister herself make herself available to meet with the family to discuss how these sorts of terrible instances can be mitigated against in the future?
I'm sure the Minister would make herself available if that would be appropriate.
My last question goes to something I saw in some previous ATSB reports in terms of doing some due diligence on this matter. I understand that there's a section, what has been done as a result.
Yep.
Is that a regular feature of ATSB reports? Is it an
think so.
ATSB responsibility or a CASA responsibility?
I think they tend to report on, since the accident, if there's, we provide them with information that they would include in their report to say actions that have been taken to address the issues that they've identified.
And CASA did provide information to the ATSB on this particular matter for this particular report?
This predates my tenure in the organisation, so I'd have to check, but I assume
Mr.
that we
Walker?
would have.
Likewise predates my tenure in this role, so...
Mr Monahan?
Chris Monahan, Executive Manager of National Operations Centre, same, it predates me as well.
But Senator, as a matter of course, we typically do. So while we'll check the detail for you, we typically do.
That's my understanding as
Yeah.
a matter of course. My question goes to, was that matter of course continued in this particular instance? Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Ms Spence and other officials for that, and we will absolutely take up the opportunity to meet with the family. Tragic set of circumstances, and if you could take on notice whether or not CASA will release that report and or have it peer reviewed. I appreciate that. Thanks very much for your time.
Right, Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for appearing again tonight. Ms Spence, are you the beneficiary of you or any of your executive management or your board members, the beneficiaries of any benefits given from any airlines here in Australia?
No, Senator. And if we received any hospitality or gifts or anything like that, we would declare it, but I'm certainly not the beneficiary of any... Sorry, can you repeat that phrase again?
Beneficiary of any benefits gifted from any airlines here in Australia?
Only what we would report in our gifts register.
What are they?
I can't think of anything that has been. If we had, if any, I can say that I haven't, but certainly if any of my executive team had, it would be reported, and as far as I'm aware, nothing's been reported.
Can you please take it on notice to provide a list detailing anything CASA representatives have received?
Yes,
on our website.
It'll be on our
Senator,
website, but
it's
yes,
on
of
our
course we can,
website.
Senator.
So you're going to do that, Ms Spence?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. Now, could I have a medical expert? Is it Mr Margiela? Is that how you pronounce it?
Marcella, yes, Senator.
Marcella. Okay, thank you. What is the definition of subclinical?
Senator, I'm not a medical expert of that type.
So Kate Manderson's not here again?
Senator, we only found out, the request only came to us yesterday asking her to come to the thing and to come to Senate estimates, but she was travelling overseas on official duties and so is unable to be here this evening.
So Chair, I just want to put on the record that we asked, I think about 2 weeks before the previous Senate estimates, and we asked several weeks before this Senate estimates. That's
Senator
twice we've asked for Kate Manderson because of her role as a senior medical officer.
So, Senator Roberts, just get your office to send copies of that to the committee.
Okay.
Senator, while I've got you, one thing probably I should have mentioned, of course, is a number of the executive team would get lounge membership by the airline, so I'll provide that on notice. Who's got those memberships? Like, for example, I've got a chairman's lounge membership.
Thank you. Who's responsible, Mr Margiela, for passenger safety with regards to pilot and medical health evaluation and monitoring in Australia?
Senator, we conduct medical certification, as we've spoken about before.
Yep. Is there any other department, agency or organisation, either domestically or internationally, that has legal authority, responsibility, jurisdiction, oversight or liability over Australian pilot and passenger safety?
Senator, I'd imagine that employers have obligations for pilots, but when it comes to certification of pilots and whether they're fit to fly, that's our accountability.
So, apart from private companies, employers, no government agency, department or organisation?
When it comes to determining whether a pilot is fit to fly, that's our remit. So our remit is aviation safety and the medical certification that would support aviation safety.
Thank you. So it's fair to say the buck stops with you or with CASA?
Within the scope that I described, yes.
Yeah. So your website says that CASA uses multi-crew endorsements as a means of risk mitigation. Their use enables pilots to continue flying despite the presence of medically significant conditions which would otherwise pose an unacceptable risk to the safety of air navigation. How many pilots are currently flying passengers with a medically significant condition, CASA restriction, could result in a pilot incapacitation?
Senator, there is a requirement for most airline aircraft, as you'd know, to have 2 pilots. That extends to safety mitigators well beyond medicine. I'm not sure exactly what your question is.
I want to know how many pilots cannot fly alone.
I could take that on notice, but it would be a very small number.
Okay.
Yep.
Can you please provide on notice how many multi-crew endorsements CASA has issued by year over the last 5 years? By year, each year.
We can take on notice just to
Yep.
see if that data is available.
Thank you. How did you evaluate the aeromedical implications of the pilots taking the new mRNA technology injections, COVID injections, at low atmospheric conditions?
Senator, we would not have made any evaluation of that.
No evaluation?
No.
Okay. In an aeromedical context, do you consider that you have any additional responsibility to evaluate or at least surveil a new medical technology that only has provisional approval?
No, Senator, we don't.
Okay. But you told me you have responsibility for aero health monitoring.
Senator, when we evaluate a medicine, we look at what the potential significance of that medicine is on a pilot. We don't test that. We rely on medical authorities to test whether medicines are suitable for use. We look at what the implications are for medicines in an medical context, and as we've spoken many times before, when it comes to vaccinations, we treat vaccinations all the same. So a vaccination that's approved for use in the population, we simply ask that pilots stand down from flying duties for 24 hours to make sure that there's no adverse reaction to that, and if there are reactions to that beyond that, we would expect them to report that and stand down.
Are you aware that there is a COVID-19 vaccine injury compensation scheme in operation in Australia now?
Senator, I would take your word for that. I'm not
So
aware.
you weren't aware of it?
Senator, no.
I wonder what it's for.
You tell me.
People have been injured or killed by these injections. You mentioned 24 hours. They have to stand down for 24 hours.
Senator, we do not have a role, as I think we've spoken about on many occasions, about the health implications of vaccinations on the Australian population. That is a matter for the Department of
You're
Health.
solely responsible for safety.
We are solely responsible for determining whether there is an aviation safety risk, and I can categorically tell you that it is our view there is no aviation safety risk from the vaccinations.
And Senator, as we have said repeatedly, we have not had a single incident involving an adverse reaction to a COVID vaccination by a pilot.
Are you aware that that last year, 2022, there were more than 30,000 deaths after the vaccines were introduced? Sorry, for the whole of the year.
Sorry, Senator,
you aware?
that's got nothing to do with us.
Okay, let's continue. So it's not of interest to you? Because they're
honest-
temporarily correlated with the injections. Not of interest.
Senator, I genuinely feel we have nothing to add to the line of
Let's
questioning.
continue then. In February 2022 Zoom meeting with Virgin Pilots, CASA Principal Medical Officer Kate Manderson stated that the provisionally approved mRNA vaccines can cause myocarditis and pericarditis, but that she'd rather pilots got those conditions from the vaccine rather than COVID itself, which she claimed to be of higher risk. What evidence did Kate Manderson have to substantiate these comments?
Senator, we categorically can tell you that there is no aviation safety risk that we consider is associated with COVID vaccination.
Yet Kate Manderson, your senior medical officer, says that there's an associated the vaccines can cause myocarditis and pericarditis.
I expect, Senator, what she was saying is that you may, but the bigger issue is that there's a greater chance of those sorts of impacts if someone actually got COVID. And again, I would definitely want to see that quote in broader context, because I think reading something like that out could be potentially quite misleading.
You're saying that without hearing it?
I'm saying that without seeing the whole context in which the statement was made.
We'll get it to you.
That'd be great. Thanks, Senator.
So I want to know what evidence, medical evidence, Kate Manderson had that can substantiate her comments.
Okay, Senator.
So I take it on notice?
Yes, Senator.
So I asked you on notice, SQ 23-003393, to provide me the rates of significant diseases over the previous 5 years for the following conditions: pericarditis and myocarditis, thrombosis with thrombocytopenia syndrome, immune thrombocytopenic purpura, capillary leak syndrome, Guillain-Barré syndrome, any cardiac-related conditions or injuries, any immune-related conditions or injuries. These are recognised adverse reactions to COVID-19 injections. The injection manufacturers and the medical authorities have acknowledged this. You completely failed to answer any of them for any year. Your response to me was that your medical record system does not even capture information on these diseases in a way that can be accurately reported.
That's correct, Senator.
I am struggling to understand then how you have not been misleading in your previous evidence. Over many sessions you have maintained to me that there have been no safety signals or concerns about COVID vaccination, yet I am only now finding out that your medical record system does not even have the capacity to report on some of the most significant adverse events to COVID vaccination. How can you maintain there's nothing in the data to indicate a concern when you don't have the data? You're literally flying blind.
Well, Senator, we haven't had any incidents associated with COVID vaccination, so there is no data because there are no incidents. I'm sorry, Senator, I don't know how much clearer I can be.
But you can't measure this.
We haven't had an incident to measure it with, though, Senator.
Sorry, Senator Robertson and Ms Spencer, I'm loath to do this, but Senator Roberts, I could go to standing order, and I can't remember the number, but it's titled tedious repetition. I know you've been asking these questions in and out. I don't know how anyone in CASA can explain to you any more that they don't have any more evidence. You have the call, Senator Roberts, and Senator McDonald is waiting patiently as well, but we've all waited patiently all day, so you keep going.
Does CASA still maintain that it is unaware of any pilot grounded with a COVID vaccine injury?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. I find it hard to believe, given the rates of adverse events that are huge and startling, that no pilots have it, but every other citizen does, every other category of citizen does. What supervision of Qantas engine trend monitoring is undertaken by CASA, given that there have been a significant amount of incidents over the near past?
Senator, is this around issues around the turnarounds with Qantas aircraft? Is that what?
It's air incidents. I've got data.
Oh,
Can I table this, Chair?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Senator, if what I understand is correct, and you're talking about sort of some of the media coverage around the number of turnarounds because of potential concerns with aircraft safety, we've done an analysis over a 10-year time frame saying there's been no material increase in the number or severity of air turnback type occurrences in 2023 to date.
So perhaps you could tell me on notice whether or not the list I've just given you from a whistleblower is normal or abnormal.
Senator, certainly I'll be happy to do that, but as I said, based on the analysis that we've done, there hasn't actually been any material increase in the number or severity of air turnbacks. But that's on the analysis that we've done. I'll take on notice based on the list that you've just provided us.
So this is a list of incidents that I've tabled that have been provided to me. Can you please verify if those have been reported or lodged with CASA on, just do it on notice?
Yeah, but Senator, based on my quick scan, these are all ones that we're aware of, and I don't think that would change what I've just told you about no material increase in the number or severity of air turnback type occurrences.
Well, perhaps you could have a look at it in detail first before making a comment.
Yeah.
And I'd like to know, is this surprising or normal?
I think that's what I was just telling you, Senator.
I understand,
based
but I'd
on-
like to know once you've had a look at it, not before you've had a look at it. I would be surprised if it's normal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Senator McDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Ms Spence, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Senator. How are you?
Great to see you. I've got some questions. So the legislative change process to align with the KO, you notified of proposed changes, the Part 139, it's all gone well, but there was the small part of the, I'm going to say CAO, but do we have a funny way to say that?
Civil Aviation Order.
Yes, not a summary. Anyway, to operate to manufacture specs that's been in use for the last 50 years. And so it's added a safety performance factor of 20% to Northern Australia airstrips. You know all about this, and I have to tell you that the industry has been very complimentary of the very helpful way that CASA has gone about trying to resolve the issues for Murray Island, for Darnley Island and Mabuig Island.
Yeah, Mabuig, yeah.
And so you've given an allowance for the short landing approval. The company's done modifications of $17,000 US per aircraft. But we still have this problem that we've got two islands that the aircraft have been landing at for the last 20 years and now they can't. I understand, so I'm just going to finish my understanding of the situation. So my understanding is that the company is now submitting a test flying program and that hopefully somebody's going to sign off for it. What I wanted to talk to you about was I understand that under the legislation you don't have a legislated way to solve this. You have to keep providing workarounds for each circumstance, and so I just, I keep hearing about, whether it's the big guys like Qantas or Virgin or Rex or little operators like this one, that, everybody's been granted exemptions, there are workarounds. So how do we talk about legislative change frameworks that means we're not having to do this? It just seems extraordinary.
Look, it's a really, it's been one of the most difficult issues that I've actually dealt with since I've been in CASA.
Oh, this really? Because I know you've dealt with some difficult issues.
But this one is because everything in me says these people desperately need these services.
Yeah, they're in a dinghy now.
Because the alternatives are so terrible.
Yeah.
But the other side of it is they're operating on airstrips which were built post-Second World War and were designed for a certain type of aircraft which doesn't operate there anymore. And so we've now got, they're certainly technically better aircraft, but they are bigger and more powerful than what was designed to operate onto these airstrips. So we are working very closely with the operator you mentioned to see how do we actually make it work for the two remaining islands. And I think if we haven't yet, we will be going back to them shortly saying, yes, do the flight testing that they've proposed. And to your point, we do want to find an enduring solution to this because there will be a number of other aerodromes which have got not dissimilar issues. It's not a bad thing to provide exemptions for certain types of activity, but what we'd like to be able to do is more of a class exemption thing rather than having to deal with everything on a case-by-case basis. So our hope is that by working through the issue that we are currently with the operator you mentioned, we will be able to find a way of actually coming up with a more enduring solution for these circumstances where you have got, the preference to use a more sophisticated aircraft, but you're operating on airstrips which are never designed for that type of aircraft.
But there's no safety case. They've been operating on those strips for 20 years using a caravan
No, so Senator,
Without incident?
you are right around the length of time that they've been offered. It wouldn't be 20 years with the caravan. They would have previously been using the Islanders, which would have actually been the ones that are designed to operate on those strips. But at the end of the day, the manufacturers themselves say these aircraft aren't designed to operate on those strips. And so essentially and again, this is the logic part that is very difficult to come to terms with, but the bottom line is you're asking us to approve something that is not as safe as what other people would get, and it's trying to get that balance between if there is no alternative, then is something we provide less assurance around a better outcome than no outcome at all, and that's what we're working through at the moment, Senator.
So at the moment, the alternative is there in a dinghy in crocodile and shark infested waters? We
met with the council when we were up in Cairns a few weeks ago, and one of the things that we discussed with them is if they felt comfortable writing to us and explaining to us in the absence of us approving it what the alternative looks like, and for us to see how do they say to us, we accept and understand that this is not the same level of assurance that you would get in other areas for this particular location because the need for the service is greater than what the alternative might look like.
This is complex, and I've listened to the questions from Senator Smith and, Senator Roberts, and I appreciate that CASA is under pressure to provide more regulation, different standards. But how many strips do you think this applies to?
I think it's six, Senator, in the Torres Strait that we're looking at.
What about the rest of Northern Australia?
So we haven't identified any at this stage, but we are actively looking to see whether the solution that we're talking about here would have a broader application, and where we're aware there may be some need is in the aeromedical, so the Royal and Flying Doctors and others. So we're actively trying to look at whether there are others, but there's none that have been brought to our attention at the moment. Yeah.
So my understanding is the reason you became aware of this was another airline. Maybe a competitor brought this to your attention?
No, it was actually the operator themselves who raised it with us. Which is one, I think it's a big kudos to that operator who has been...
That's not my understanding. They said they weren't made aware of the change of legislation and it was an audit that CASA came to them. So, Senator,
this is where it gets even more complex. It wasn't as a result of the change of regulations. I think there was a difference in interpretation of how some of the civil aviation orders worked. I think we could have certainly been clearer, but at the end of the day, it wasn't a change in regulation.
All right. So what I would need to understand is how many strips you've identified and where, how many operators are now affected, and I guess I'm really concerned that we don't have a safety case for change. I know that CAS will say that this is the new world and this has not been safe, but there's been no incident, no reason that you would say that these people are now forced into a more dangerous outcome because we have decided to change the rules.
And as I said, we're working on the basis of what the aircraft manufacturer says is safe. It's not us changing the rules. But I'm not disagreeing with the scenario where we've landed in, which is how can we safely ensure that these people get aviation services, but it's also making sure that we don't approve something that then, again, going back to Senator Smith's, I'd hate to be sitting here and saying, what on earth were you thinking, Ms Spence, when you allowed these operations to occur?
Yes,
and that's a balance.
There wasn't a problem that you were trying to fix.
Yeah.
You've identified a problem you've identified an issue that didn't have a problem.
We've identified
a whole lot of people who have a worse problem, which is that but if they were to go and privately hire the caravan, that wouldn't be subject to these rules.
That's correct, because they'd be operating privately, not as a commercial transport operator.
It makes no sense.
But Senator, that's the exact conversation we were having a moment ago. We have a much higher safety standard for a commercial operation. I understand that, but for the people who are now in crocodile and shark waters, and we lose people, or people who have terrible situations in dinghies in the Torres Strait
frequently.
So we had a really good conversation with the operator, and they've stepped us through all the additional mitigating actions they're taking. So they've done additional pilot training, they're marking runways. So they're now about to go and do a test program to see whether all those other things they've developed can give us a level of assurance.
They are very complimentary of CASA's approach and the way that you're doing it. But I'm worried that once again CASA has identified a problem that didn't exist.
And we would categorise it differently to that, Senator, but I think we're all in furious agreement
Yes, well,
about
CASA
the need
always identifies it differently to that. Yeah. And that's why I end up here at estimates every single time, tediously for you, no doubt. But, so you're going to identify how many strips. I appreciate you're going to try and sort it for the RFDS, but there's a whole lot of other operators other than the RFDS. And we rely on it in Northern Australia. General aviation is our bread and butter to get around. And this is once again CASA. I mean, I shudder to think how much all these test flights, the new weights and the measurements, and we're going to fly out and we're going to do it over and over again, send you videos, because you don't want to authorise that happening. But you'll authorise it once they've sent you all this information, but you're not actually engaged in saying that this is a process that you authorise.
But I think one of the things that will come out of this, and the operators already said it to us, they genuinely feel their operations into Murray Island are safer now than they were. And they say that is a good thing.
Well, and it is quite an isolated issue because those runways on those islands are particularly short. So there are not many other locations where we're
I look forward to you actually doing it. So I understand there's an audit of Indigenous strips, maybe with the infrastructure department.
Maybe it'd be the department.
I heard something over today, but you know there'll be strips all over the country, and guess what? The infrastructure department's not going to pay for them all to be upgraded.
But not all of them will have the significant issue around. It's not just it's short. It's got soft. It's soft at the end of the runway. So you've got. It's just a particularly challenging environment.
Somebody could pay for it to be fixed. Yeah. So do you think the government, the infrastructure department, would pay for that to be fixed?
Oh, Senator, you know what answer I'm going to give you.
Well, I know. I'm kind of Minister. Do you think that that would be something that could be looked at? I mean, so we've raised that there are two islands. Hey?
Must wait for the voice.
The voice, yes, indeed. Thank you. So do you think that the two islands that are now have no passenger service going into them, that this is a good outcome?
There is. We did cover off this, I think, yesterday. Senator Kennedy asked a question about the remote airport upgrade fund, which another round was agreed to in the budget, and I know we have funded some support for airport strips in Cape Islands, so it might be something that they can apply through as part of that.
Yeah, terrific. Oh well, if you'd take carriage of that, I just think it's pretty shocking that we've actually gone backwards as a result of regulation. And so for the people on those islands, I think it's a poor outcome.
Yeah, understood.
So again, the industry bodies have all been complimentary of the fact that there's not a legislative fix. You're going to have to do this kind of people out there with sandbags and waiting things, and you know, but we've created a problem that didn't exist, and the people who are worse off.
As I said, Senator, my hope is we can find a more enduring solution that will actually be, beneficial to the communities, because they will actually have a safer services when we can get those services back. So will you write to the Minister alerting her to these two specific islands and the issues? Could you? Yes, Senator. I mean I mean, we want a solution out of this. We provide. What I can let you know is we do regular reporting to the Minister, so we can include an update on how we're going on this particular issue in the next update. I think that would be terrific for the pregnant girl who goes into labour and has no solution now because we've taken it away. It will be cold comfort if something terrible happens to somebody, because we're so smart and so modern that we won't let people land on places where they've been landing for 20 years. Okay, that is the end of my questions for CASA. That is the end for CASA.
Thank you. We'll now call Infrastructure Australia.
Thank you. And just while Infrastructure